Sup, Broadsart? I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, coming at you with the third vintage horror book review for Satanic Summer. Today, we are taking a look at Satan's Mistress by Brian McNaughton. This is the U.S. edition published by Carlyle in 1978, as is clearly evident by those amazing teal edges that they used to do in the 1970s. It was subsequently published in the UK by Star in, I believe, 1982. I will begin by reading the synopsis from the back cover. All the dreams are nightmares. The new shocker by Brian McNaughton, author of Satan's Love Child, one of last year's most talked about bestsellers. Patrick Laughlin, obsessed with strange documents unearthed by his insane mother, tries to raise an ancestor from the dead, only to find a monstrosity he cannot control, Satan's mistress. You won't be able to put this book down until the last terrifying page has melted from your hand. By the author of Satan's Love Child. You can definitely tell how 70s that synopsis sounds, right? Well, it must be said, first off, that the title of this novel is very misleading, as Satan really doesn't figure into the story too prominently. There is a character who is a Satanist, but that's dealt with more peripherally. Rather, what we have here is a kind of possession story meets haunted house story meets balls to the wall Lovecraftian mythos story. And one that deals with a host of topics that may be familiar to readers of vintage pulp horror. I'm talking stuff like frustrated teen lust, rape and incest, dark family heritage, baby-eating rituals, that kind of stuff. Not to mention also some well-wrought human drama that wouldn't be out of place in like a John Irving or John Updike novel. Things like marital infidelity, family secrets, and so on. So, basically, strange things have been happening ever since the Laughlin family has moved into their new home, a house that has been converted from an old mill hundreds of years ago. Now, the Laughlins consist of husband Frank, a successful commercial artist, his wife Rose, who had actually inherited this house from her father, and 15-year-old son Patrick. So we'll start with Patrick. So ever since moving into the house, Patrick has been having these strange dreams, all involving this mysterious red-haired woman. Now, this redhead is a goddess, and Patrick is completely consumed by her. And in fact, he spends all of his waking hours thinking about her, and he's convinced that she's real because these dreams are very realistic. And so he's on the lookout, always like hoping to find her, though in the back of his mind he knows that that is just juvenile wishful thinking, because she's just a figment of his imagination. And just as well, too, probably, because there is something sort of almost malevolent about this red-headed goddess, whom he refers to as his succubus. There's like an evil gleam in her eyes, something almost decadent and perverse, right? And now, this is all quite shameful to Patrick, who is a little influenced by his quasi-Catholic parents, that masturbation, or onanism, as it's referred to in the book, which I just love, is beneath him. And he knows that he really needs like a real girl. He should find a real girl. You shouldn't be having these, these fantasies. But it's kind of hard because he's kind of like a shy and withdrawn kid. Now, there is a cheerleader at his school that he does like, a girl named Shanna Jennings, although she's not even close to being as hot as this, this redheaded succubus from his dreams. And she's also kind of dating a junior from the high school who's got kind of a wild reputation. But he does kind of like this girl, and, he helps her copy his homework. He likes to watch her cheerlead at school. And really the important thing to Patrick, though, is that she's real, that she's a real girl. He realizes it's probably not healthy to be so fixated on, like some dream woman. So he does like this girl, and in fact, the redhead from his dreams tells him in his dreams that if he wanted, he could have this girl Shanna, and in fact says that he could have many other things as well if he just stops resisting her and quote unquote receives the light. The interesting thing is that Patrick's father, Frank, the artist, is currently working on a painting up in his studio in the attic of the this mill house where they live, and he's working on this painting. He doesn't have a model for the painting, so he's trying to do it from scratch, and he just can't get this face out of his mind, and it just keeps recurring, and he keeps drawing or painting the same face, and that face, as it turns out, is the exact same red-haired goddess of his son Patrick's dreams, whom neither of them have ever seen in real life. So that's a little interesting, right? Meanwhile, Patrick's mother, Rose, is disturbed by night sounds coming from outside and thinks that the sounds of the water channel that drive the mill sound like voices. And she has this strange feeling that there's something sinister and dangerous about this house that she has inherited and that the family has recently moved to. So one day, the Laughlin's loquacious and eccentric neighbor, nicknamed Mrs. Minotaur by Frank because of her appearance, shows up at the Laughlin house and says that her dogs had discovered a burned, mutilated, half-eaten baby outside the brook by their house. And she's worried about this, and she's concerned that it could be Dr. Ashcroft, a practicing Satanist who lives upstream, that might have done this as part of one of his weird, occult rituals, and dropped the baby in the water. And so Rose assures her neighbor, no, Mr. Ashcroft is harmless. Of course, it wasn't him. And she tries to calm her neighbor down and invites her neighbor to a Halloween costume party that the Laughlin family is throwing. And she says, why don't you go ahead and bring your daughter, Rose, or no, not Rose. What's her daughter's name? Doesn't matter. Amy. She says, why don't you bring your daughter Amy along with you? Because Rose is worried that her son Patrick, who she knows is quite shy and, kind of a loser, and is not going to be able to get a date, doesn't have any friends to invite to the party. So she thinks it might be nice, if the neighbor would bring along her daughter for Patrick to have, right? Well, actually, Patrick does, in fact, work up the nerve to invite Shanna Jennings, the hot cheerleader from school, to the Halloween party. And much to his surprise, she accepts the invitation. So Patrick is thrilled. He's so happy about this. He skips home. He wants to, share the good news. His mother is out at the time, so he goes up to his father's studio loft where he's painting to tell his father the news. And when he's up there, he looks at the easel of his father's current painting and is shocked when he sees, of course, the red-haired goddess of his dreams in the painting that his father is currently working on. And his father claims that he has no idea who this person is. She just came to him out of nowhere. And Patrick realizes that something odd is definitely going on, and he resolves to try to find out what's going on, maybe by asking some of his parents' academic friends at the Halloween party, which is coming up. And at the party, he does, in fact, ask a couple of the adults there, and none of whom, give it any credence. And the only one who really takes it seriously is, in fact, Dr. Ashcroft, the Satanist, who tells Patrick that he and his family should probably get themselves away from this mill as soon as possible. Now, during the Halloween party, some strange things start to happen with Patrick. Suddenly, odd, archaic diction and syntax starts being integrated into his speech. He starts to talk like a person from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, apropos of nothing. He also starts experiencing these quasi-violent urges. When one of the teenage bullies from his high school, whom Shanna brought with her to the party in such a dick move, starts being an asshole to Patrick. He becomes overwhelmed with this powerful sensation, and he like knocks the teenage bully on the ground. He starts like reciting this arcane litany and causing the bully to have this kind of freak seizure in which he starts like bleeding out of his eyes and frothing at the mouth. Very, very strange, right? Also during the party, a mysterious woman rings the doorbell but refuses to enter when Rose invites her in, and she starts delivering this cryptic message to the mother, Rose, telling her to claim her inheritance and trying to like send a message from Rose's dead father. And she also tells Rose that she's being that she's being betrayed in her own home, which in fact is true, because at that moment Rose's husband Frank is low-key banging someone upstairs, which is kind of funny. But Rose, this woman tells Rose that she must, quote, take the power and use it. And then she vanishes. So it's very, very mysterious. And then, soon thereafter, Rose becomes possessed of this trance-like obsession to break through the stone foundation of the cellar. And she takes a hammer, starts swinging at the foundation, trying to break through. Her son Patrick goes down there, tries to reason with her, and then she kind of loses it and attacks him after making some lewd comments about not being screwed out of her inheritance and talking about how she like banging her father. And then she kind of completely loses it, but then the part of the wall where she was hammering at does in fact cave in and reveals a secret passage that leads to an underground library filled with all sorts of ancient books and papers and artifacts. So Patrick later goes on to sort of like investigate this secret underground library and discovers some papers relating to an ancestor of his mother's, a man named Mordred Glendower. A dude from the 16th century with an unsavory reputation, to say the least. This guy was kind of like a dark wizard who was reputed to have found the secret to eternal life through the use of occult rituals that included eating the flesh of infants and banging his daughter. He had actually, there were rumors at the time that this mill where he worked and the present site of the Laughlin house was just like a cover for his malefic secret activities. And he would, it was rumored that he had an incestuous relationship with his own daughter, because apparently he could only pass on his godlike powers to a son of his own daughter. And so basically, he would be reincarnated through this sort of incest, okay? And so people of the time were, of course, horrified of this. They burned down the mill with Mordred Glendower in it, and then legends persisted up to the current day of Mordred's ghost sort of haunting the mill and sort of stealing children from the nearby farms to be part of these these blood rituals, so that he could try to come back. Also, interestingly, when Patrick is kind of rifling through this underground library, he comes across a book that just may be the Necronomicon, the famous book of incantations and spells from H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, which, according to this novel, that mythos might actually be real, and that this might be actually the real Necronomicon from Lovecraft's stuff. So, after all this has happened, things continue to be strange. After Patrick discovers this book that just may be the Necronomicon, suddenly that hot cheerleader, Shanna Jennings, who was quite a bitch to Patrick, inviting her boyfriend to the Halloween party and a bunch of other teenage douchebags who were kind of bullying Patrick and the other teens there. She's now suddenly obsessed with Patrick. She becomes infatuated with him, worships him, and starts going by the nickname Mistress Jennings. Very, very odd. So, with all this happening, with, these changes happening with Patrick, could it be that Patrick is maybe slowly being possessed by this evil ancient ancestor, Mordred Glendower. Could he be the next reincarnation of that, that wizard? If that's the case, and he's in possession of the actual Necronomicon, this could spell doom for the world, because, he would then have the power to, raise the dead and, vanquish all living beings on Earth, right? So pretty serious stuff. So the ending of this novel, which I think some people may have a problem with, is left a tad oblique. There are not a lot of questions answered. Although the story does evidently continue with the follow-up book, Satan's Seductress. So it is possible that some of the questions that are unanswered in this book are addressed in the follow-up, which I would love to read at some point, because I really, really enjoyed this novel. So my thoughts on the novel, first of all, everyone who reads this novel talks about the Halloween party, and for good reason. It is an amazing scene, and unlike most Halloween parties you might read about in these, horror books dealing with like stoned and drunken teenagers. Although stoned and drunken teenagers do show up in this one, this is more of an adult Halloween party. In fact, it almost kind of reminded me of the key party scene in Rick Moody's novel, The Ice Storm. Although in this one, it's got like all these urbane academics, dressed up as like Zorro or the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz or Robin Hood and so on. The characters in this novel were really well developed, much better developed than most characters. I loved Patrick's father, Frank, even though he's not a likable character. On the contrary, he's actually quite a dick. He's moody, morose, aggro, although really well realized. And I never really understand the complaint readers have when they say, "Oh, I need to have likable characters." Well, like for me, I just need to have like well realized characters. If a character feels well developed and interesting and has dimensions, then I think an author has done his or her job. The author does all these like real subtle little character touches that I thought were really good. Like these little minor moments in scenes, such as like a character taking a bite like out of food to end a conversation that's uncomfortable for him or her, or doing these little things to like forestall uncomfortable questions or moments. All the things that we have all done in the past or have witnessed, people do. Really, really spot on, I thought. Really rang true to me. I love the relationship that the author develops between Patrick and his sort of like sophisticated, urbane parents. Like his parents, they kind of see Patrick as more of like a young friend that lives with them as a son. And they like encourage him to call them by their names, not mom and dad. So Patrick like calls his dad Frank and his mom Rose. And so I thought that was pretty amusing. And the repartee that Patrick has with his father in particular is really, really amusing. And the dialogue, I must mention, is fantastic here. Really, really rings true. McNaughton has a great ear for dialogue. Even the teen dialogue I thought was well done, which is not common to have like well done, adult and teen dialogue. There's also some excellent humor in this book, and some really comedic dialogue, especially in the dialogue exchanges between Frank and Rose, the husband and wife. Thought it was really, really well done. The book has a healthy dose of humor to leaven the horror just right. I think McNaughton really gets that balance right. It's hard to do, but he gets it right, just the way like John Landis, I think, got it right in the movie American Werewolf in London, where you keep the horror horrific and treat it seriously, yet the characters are personable and funny. So it's just like the best combination, right? Just absolutely perfect. As far as the prose, this book is written in a clear, clean, spare, yet very vivid style that I thought was compulsively readable. On a technical level, the prose flows smoothly. It's got nice, diction and syntax. Got some great descriptions of this mill house where the Laughlin family is staying. Parts of the house are like almost futuristic, and then other parts are kind of like medieval and dungeon-like with these like heavy stone walls and this like sickly green light reflecting from a algae scummed pond outside. Some really memorable scenes and some really well done horrific scenes. In fact, I want to read to you guys a quote of a character's encounter with an eldritch creature that I thought was super, super cool, super well done. So, where there should have been the smoothness of a woman's legs, there was the coarseness of animal hair. Where human knees would have bent outward, these bent inward, like the legs of a beast. He screamed as he saw, amid the steely bristles, dozens, no, hundreds of tiny red orifices, pulsating and sucking, opening and closing, throbbing and quivering with pustulant life, each of them surrounded with questing, furry tendrils. He was yanked inward, screaming, to these mouths, to the oozing sources of the abominable odor. He could no longer scream, for one of the mouths had clamped over his, and he felt his teeth dissolving in the overflow of its acid slime. He fought maniacally, thrusting out with his fists, but their impact on scales and bristles was unaccountably soft and ineffective. Then he saw that the solid flesh of his hands and wrists was being transformed into a milky, mucilaginous jelly. Is that not just like amazing? Just like so good. I absolutely love it. Yeah, okay, what else? So there is a lot of Freud in this book, which I thought was pretty interesting, particularly concerning a boy's relationship with his mother, a woman's relationship with her father, and the subtle antagonism that can exist between father and son. It definitely proves that incestuous tropes were not born of the horror in the 1980s. They may have peaked in the 1980s, but they definitely were thriving in the 1970s as well. For instance, okay, there's a scene where Patrick discovers his mother. I think it's during the Halloween party, when she's looking for a secret passage in the cellar of their house. And she's inexplicably naked, completely naked except for like tennis shoes. And it's never adequately stated why she's naked, other than the fact that she's like sexually liberated and she likes it. Well, there is like a hint of why she may be naked, but it's not very convincing. I think the real reason McNaughton did that was so teenage Patrick could have impure thoughts of his mother as he watches her bare buttocks jiggle and clench while she's walking ahead of him, or as he watches and notices how like her nipples are standing erectly and like giving him a hard on, which is just like hilarious. So vintage, right? There's also some really dated views of homosexuality in this book, and some pretty heavy homophobia, particularly conveyed in some of the dialogue, which is unfortunate, but I think that's just kind of, it wasn't totally uncommon for the time period. But overall, I had such a blast reading this thing. This is clearly a 1970s horror novel, from the execution, from the high quality prose and characterization, some of the wacky ideas that are presented in this book. But it's just a blast. You do need to be patient, though, if you read this, because it definitely takes its time. It doesn't give you all the answers, and you will, like I said, be left with a few answers at the end. And the horror is not like nonstop and in your face from page one. But if you are patient and you are willing to like go along with it, you will be rewarded by just like some awesome stuff. Like I mentioned, like secret subterranean libraries, baby eating rituals, literary conspiracies, reincarnations of godlike wizards on Earth, Lovecraftian mythos, including the great old ones, the Necronomicon itself, resurrected squamous abominations that feed on human flesh and are yearn for the grave. So a lot of great stuff to recommend here. So I say check Satan's Mistress out if you can find it. I had a great time reading it. So that's the review, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have read Satan's Mistress or any of the other Satan books that Brian McNaughton wrote, let me know. I'm very looking forward to getting to more of them. I have another one of these, I think it's Satan's Surrogate, that I recently picked up, and I'm really excited for that one and the rest of them. I will read them all because I think that they're really interesting and fun to read. Let me know if you guys are familiar with it, and thanks for watching as always. I really appreciate it. Be on the lookout for more book reviews in the Satanic Summer series, and probably another haul coming up soon. Till next time, guys. Peace out.